Ballpark Nation presents. Welcome to GoGoAstros, your look at the two-time World Series champions from three guys who have been here since Art Howe had hair.
Good morning, Astros fans. It is Monday, and therefore it is time for another edition of the GoGoAstros show. If you're expecting the lucid pipes and tight beard of James Christopher, we tried to give a live link up from the LaGuardia Airport terminal. Turns out that modern technology doesn't work there. So instead, he's actually up here. So I went to a ball game with him on Saturday, and he's traveling back to do Ballpark Nation stuff. So it's just Andy. Andy, how are you? How's your weekend?
I like just Andy. So there's no truth to the rumor that he stayed in Brooklyn to open an artisan chestnut roasting factory.
I can neither confirm nor deny that. We hung out with a lot of hipsters at the, well, James is a minor league hipster, so he's at the minor league hipster ballpark, right?
Well, if there's anything James loves more than baseball and sharks, it's Christmas. So an artisan chestnut roasting factory seems right in line. Mm-hmm. We sell small jars of hand roasted chestnuts.
So that'll be available for Christmas this year. Please look for an advertisement on the Ballpark Nation feed as soon as possible. But we are not here to talk about artistic chestnuts. We are not here to talk about roasting open fires. We are here to talk about the Houston Astros. And if we can just skip Sunday, everyone's really happy with Friday and Saturday.
I mean, I wasn't unhappy with Sunday other than the final result. Blanco gave up a little bit too much. In every baseball game, somebody's going to step up and do something weird for that team to win. And if you're going to keep everybody else on that team down, but Dylan Moore beats you, I guess you just have to take it because that's what happened mostly on Sunday. But no, the Astros went into Seattle needing to win a series to be in first place, and they won a series, and they're in first place by 1/100 of a percentage point. But it counts. If the season were to end today, we would not be required to play any more games. We would just be in first place, and that's where I'm hoping we're staying for the rest of the schedule that's printed right now.
Yeah, I mean, my reaction always to the thought if the season ended today, it should be followed by it'd be a big surprise to everybody. Because he gets,
get paid less.
Yes, which would be among the problems and among the surprises. The owners would make less money, which sometimes I think they're fine with. But anyway, that's a different conversation. But it does lead to, hey, you're tied after, what have they played, 99 games?
Astros have played 99. The Mariners have played 101.
Mm-hmm. So you've got 63 games left, and it's just can you outplay the Mariners over 63 games? And you did not play them over the first 99, but I think there's every reason to think they will outplay them over the final 63. They should be an inherently better team. We didn't think that in April, but I think we can be relatively confident in saying that today here in July.
Well, watching the Mariners this weekend, they've got problems. I don't know what the status is on Julio Rodriguez's injury, and I hope he's back soon. I hope he doesn't miss any time because he's a great player and he seems like a good guy. But
he's one of the most fun players in baseball. It'd be a loss.
Yeah, I mean, it's always weird when your star player takes the wind out of your sails when you're trying to do a perfunctory outrage on Twitter about somebody doing the no-fly zone. The player who invented it, and he even said it's fun. This game is fun. I took it as fun. That's what it was. So I hope he's healthy. I hope he gets back soon, and I hope he doesn't miss significant time. Even with Julio Rodriguez, though, the Mariners have problems. The Mariners have problems because they can't generate offense.
They have problems in the other 8 spots in the order, which is notable because there's only 9 of them.
Yeah, to the point that they DFA'd or put on outright waivers Ty France, who was one of their building blocks 2 years ago. And that's how quickly things can change in Major League Baseball. But he's a guy who is performing a little bit worse than John Singleton is. and doesn't have a home currently in Major League Baseball. So we'll see where he lands. Of course, Astros Twitter is, well, I know that name. Let's pick him up. I don't know that that's a great idea. He makes a lot of money, or more money than we want to spend probably for that position right now. But like you said, the rest of that team's not hitting. And that pitching can only carry them so far. Their pitching is great. You look at the scores, we won 3-0 on Friday, 4-2 on Saturday. Didn't score a lot of runs. That is a lot of runs against the Mariners. The Mariners have an excellent pitching staff. So the Astros won those games. They won those games fairly decisively. They were in control, it felt like, during the games, even if the final scores don't really reflect a big win. But the Mariners have got to find offense from somewhere, and I don't know where they do that. And that, to me, is the biggest difference, because the Astros pitching situation should get better. You assume that Verlander is going to come back. You hope Luis Garcia is going to come back. Dana Brown is saying all the right things about picking up another arm. And if those three things happen, our pitching situation gets better. The Mariners' pitching situation can't really get any better, but fixing an offense is a whole lot harder to do in midseason. And it'll be really interesting to watch. I still think it's going to be a battle till the end, but I think the Astros have more bullets in their gun, proverbial gun, so to speak. So it should be a fun rest of the summer for Houston fans.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, sort of the Seattle has problems. I mean, Rodriguez has not had a good year at the plate, but I thought that he's likely to return to form over the season. He's gotten hot over the last week, so if he's out for a couple weeks, that really, I was going to say hamstrings, but it really hobble him. It hurts.
It feels like you're twisted up about this, Brian.
I am. So, it's not good for Seattle's offense there. Okay. And again, part of that is because they've gotten terrible production from all. I mean, they moved Victor Robles up to the 2 spot in the order, to the most important spot in the order, because he's had a hot week or two. He was released by the Nationals. If you're getting Nationals cast off and putting them in important spots in the order, you're not in good shape. I expect they will get people on the trade market. But the other sort of thing, and this has been a big story in the American League West the last 2 years, is Seattle's ownership has not been willing to spend money. And it has greatly limited the choices that their front office, that Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander, their POBO and their general manager, had been able to make. And they did a lot of, rearranging deck chairs this past off season, and didn't work. So we'll see what they do here at the trade deadline. But it's harder to, as you said, it's harder to rebuild an offense than it is a pitching staff.
Well, and I think they are hamstrung a little bit. I forget the exact number, but it was something ridiculous. Like, we want to be a 540 or 560 team, because that consistently will get into the playoffs, except it hasn't gotten them into the playoffs. It'll be interesting, because I think we even said this on the show. You get rid of Teoscar Hernandez and you get rid of Eugenio Suarez, and you replace them with guys that kind of profile the same, but maybe the handedness is better for the lineup or whatever. But it was career number guys that just weren't any better necessarily. And they struggled offensively last year too. They've actually gotten worse this year. And this isn't Go Mariners. We could probably spend a couple of hours dissecting what their issues are. I think the big challenge for the Mariners that Dipoto is going to face is to make the offense better. We're going to have to deal one of these pitchers that we have built our team around, and that I don't know how that works for them, because all of a sudden you weaken your strongest part of the team. And you can certainly win in the playoffs with 3 good pitchers, 3 good starters. I don't know how willing they are to make that call at this point in the rebuild, though.
Yeah, they have this, again, as you said, this great starting rotation, and we'll see what they do if they trade one of those guys, which would be very valuable, but also very risky. And while you don't need that many good starting pitchers in the playoffs, you may need them to get there, because your alternative is, got a prospect in AAA who's not god awful, but certainly is a downgrade. And so, again, be interesting to see what the Mariners do. But again, if they're financially limited, that'll sort of reduce their options. But as you said, Andy, this is not Go Mariners. Good luck to them this week as they do their show on the my made up Go Major League Baseball universe. Yordan Alvarez hit for the cycle yesterday. This is a neat curio. Andy, I wish you'd gotten 4 extra base hits instead of only 3. Am I running down cycles too much, or is they just so?
It's fun for the players. I would have enjoyed it more if the score had been 6-4 instead of 4-6.
Yeah.
And I think there was, some good stories around it because Mariners fan caught the ball and gave it back to Yordan, I think, in exchange for a picture. It was a feel-good story all around, and the home team got to win the game, so I guess they feel good about that. But it's a statistical curiosity. It's happened 10 times now in Astros history. The last time was last year, and Jose Altuve did it.
Before that was Brandon Barnes, which
and that's what I was about to get to. There is nothing that says these are your best players who hit for the cycle, because if you look through the list of cycles, it's littered with people you've not heard of, or at least haven't thought about in a long, long time. Hold
on. My 1989 Andujar Cedeno is going to save this franchise belief never went away, despite the fact that, evidence proved me wrong.
I have a lot of anger towards that trade that got rid of Andujar Cedeno, because he was the future at shortstop for a franchise that never really had a shortstop. But this is not Go Derek Bell either. It's good for Yordan, good for the fans if you want to celebrate that sort of thing. It is a fun personal accomplishment, but at the end of the day, you didn't win the game, and it doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot because it's just 4 more hits spread out. It's also a little bit of regret because, as we talked about, Julio Rodriguez got hurt, which lent itself to the triple.
Yeah.
That's not great, but it always seems to me that getting a cycle involves a play like that, because it's the unlikely triple that really is the problematic piece of that.
Yeah.
It usually involves somebody running headfirst into a fence and busting up their lip, and the ball ricocheting 13 different ways before it's fielded.
Yeah. Now, let's do a more sort of, let's look at Yordan sort of holistically. In April, 807 OPS. In May, 776. Not good enough. But in June, 1,139, and in July so far, 1,191. Particularly when we've needed him, particularly when Tucker's gone out. He's gone and been Yordan Alvarez. He's been the guy we sort of always think of, and not a moment too soon.
Well, I think we have to get used to this idea that over the course of a 6-month baseball season, players are going to have slumps. Players are going to not feel right. Players are going to have aches and pains. Even tough guys get injuries. Lou Brown. So it's Yordan Alvarez is the best player on the baseball team right now, healthy. You can make the argument that Kyle Tucker's right up there, but Kyle Tucker hasn't played since June 6th. So right now, Yordan Alvarez is Mr. Astro, as much as we want to give that to Jose Altuve, who also has had a very good last 30, 45 days. But he's also a guy that we got very used to. There's going to be about a 2-3 week stretch every time in the season where he doesn't look like he's ever played baseball before. And we had that already this year. Hopefully we don't see it again in August. So those two guys, if they're hitting, this team does really, really well. If they're not, they aren't. And there was a good period of time when the Astros were losing games at the beginning of this year that those guys weren't hitting. You compound that with Alex Bregman not hitting at that same time, and Yainer Diaz and Jeremy Pena kind of finding themselves a little bit as to what kind of players they needed to be in this lineup. And you had a team that was 12 games under 500. Since then, I think things have gelled. And as much as we might want to be critical of Joe Espada, it does take somewhat of a steady hand to guide guys who are used to performing at a high level when they're not, to kind of continue the path and not try to redo their entire swing mid-season, Alex Bregman. I think that it's, you have to give Espada a little bit of credit, but some of that credit is just letting Yordan Alvarez figure it out. Yeah. And he figured it out. And we're talking about maybe a month-long period out of 6 where he wasn't hitting where we expected him to. Still better than league average. Still a valuable piece of your lineup. This isn't a Jose Abreu situation. But it is a guy that the Astros need to be good and need to be performing at a high level. He is performing at a high level, and guess what? There are wins that come along with that.
Yeah. And part of my thought here in talking about him today is I think on this show we take him for granted because, hey, this guy's getting hot, we talk about him. This guy's slumping, we talk about him. Yordan Alvarez is kind of always there. And like we didn't talk about him much in April or May because even though he was off his pace, he wasn't the biggest problem. Bregman particularly was from sort of that standpoint, sort of the pitching staff was at that point. And we haven't talked about him much since then because we're like, well, of course Yordan Alvarez is hitting. He's Yordan Alvarez. And so I want to take a moment to appreciate, yes, he is Yordan Alvarez. And boy, are we lucky that the Dodgers really wanted Josh Fields.
Well, I mean, I know it's blasphemy right now because the easy answer is Jose Altuve and statistical answer is probably still Jeff Bagwell. But 10 years from now, when we're talking about the greatest all-time Astro, I really do think that provided he stays and can stay healthy, Yordan Alvarez is in that conversation, if not at the top of that conversation. He is that good, and we've taken him for granted basically since he's come up because he's just been a consistent 300 hitter who hits a lot of home runs, and they're tape measure shots, and they're beautiful, and we don't have to think about him, so we'll worry about other parts of the team.
Yeah, there was that first month, like the first time I ever talked to Jim on one of these shows was like, Yordan's coming up, what do we expect from him? And I said, power and patience, and that's basically been the analysis of him for 5 years, and as you said, probably for another 5 to 10. He's going to anchor this lineup for a really long time, and we'll see what the decline phase is at the end of his career, but he's the best Astro hitter ever.
Yeah, and the league should be very afraid if he ever starts getting the Stan Musial's treatment of Mr. Musial will let you know when it's a strike. Because I do think he gets unfairly maligned a little bit while he's at the plate sometimes by umpires who think he has a bigger strike zone than he probably actually has. But if he ever starts getting the benefit of the doubt on those outside pitches, it's going to be real trouble for baseball. He doesn't get a lot now, and I'm sure you have some stat to tell me that I'm wrong on that. But from an anecdotal standpoint, it feels like he is robbed on those pitches a little bit more than average. If that ever turns, this is an MVP candidate every year.
Yeah. And just to note this between us, the Stan Musial strike zone, they now have computers to tell them whether they're actually calling it right or not. So you actually get like fewer 3-0. I'm just going to call it a strike because it's unfair for you to walk them than when we were kids, much less when Mr. Musial will tell you strike zones. So I don't know if that'll ever turn for Yordan, but hey.
One can hope. One can hope computers are on his side.
So, hey, I'm on his side. You're on his side. Computers should be. This is what AI should be working towards. That's the AI future that we want. We talked last week extensively about the trade deadline and particularly talked about acquiring a pitcher. One conversation we didn't have, but is sort of subsumed in that, is first base. If the Astros just focus on pitching, which I think was our consensus last week, that means they're leaving John Singleton at first base. Can we live with that?
I think the Astros are preparing a world where they are going to live with that. Unless something falls in their lap. And I know the sexy talk is getting the first baseman from Toronto or some other guys that have been mentioned. But John Singleton's not exactly performing poorly. He's certainly not in the Jose Abreu realm. We have upgraded at that position since Singleton is taking the majority of the at-bats there. He doesn't hit right-handed or left-handed pitching particularly well, but other than that, he's playing solid-ish defense. I know he's not a Gold Glove candidate, but he's good enough for right now. And that's, I think the Astros, if you've got a limited amount of chips you can play in the trade market, it's going to end up being, do we need starting pitching? And I'm still of the mind that we need 2 starting pitchers. Or do we get a bat? I got to think you've got to stick with the starting pitching and use those bullets where you need to use them. It's interesting from the standpoint that if I'm looking at a starter, quote unquote, that I'd be replacing right now, it wouldn't be John Singleton. It'd be Mr. McCormick, who sometimes darkens left field with his. Well, let's say he does catch the ball when he gets to it, but
he's also. I would not describe Mr. McCormick as a starter at this point. For example,
well, I checked a couple weeks. I checked a couple weeks ago. Chaz, I know this wasn't in the Chaz McCormick hour, but the Chaz McCormick is sporting a lower OPS than any OPS Martin Maldonado ever sported as an Astro. And he's still on the roster, which, says they believe in him and all that kind of stuff. But at some point this season, the rubber's going to meet the road, and you're going to need somewhat more of a competent bat. If you're platooning Loperfido in left field when Tucker comes back, and we assume Tucker's leg is bionic at this point, because that really is the only thing that makes sense for having, 8 weeks off now with a bruise, is that they've replaced his leg. They've made him stronger, faster. Probably cost more than $6 million.
I would call him the $6 million man, but his salary is actually higher than that.
I was going to say it probably costs, in today's dollars, it costs more than $6 million to replace a shin on Kyle Tucker. Do you want to go into the playoffs or potentially a playoff chase with Joey Loperfido as your starting left fielder, or rotating Mauricio Dubon in there? I mean, there's options for the Astros. Yeah. If they're going to look for a bat, I don't think it's John Singleton that they have to worry about. I think it really is finding another outfielder who can hit consistently. But Singleton's fine. He's not a world beater. He is going to occasionally run into a pitch, and you would think that, luck being what it is in baseball, he's probably going to have a little bit of a flurry of those. And I mean, maybe 4 in a 2-week span or something like that. But he gives you competent at bats. He's one of the few Astros that actually will take a pitch at the beginning of a at bat, unlike some of our all-stars who are swing first, ask questions later. Jose Altuve. So I think he provides value. He's steady there. He's not fancy. The Astros absolutely should look to upgrade in the offseason, but in the framework of this season, I don't have an issue with what he is on the field.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am. He has one elite skill. I've talked about this before, which is that he has a really good eye at the plate. He's 88% in chase percentage, 90th percentage in walk percentage. That's the only thing he's read on in his baseball savant page. But that, I often argue, is the most important skill in baseball. If they're going to walk you, let them walk you. If they don't throw the ball over the plate, well, if they never throw the ball over the plate, they can never get an out as long as you don't swing at it. So pitch recognition, this skill is important. His power is not what we'd like it to be. He looks like he should hit with more power than he does. And his defense, he's doing well sort of catching the ball at first base, but his lateral movement is limited. And, that's a problem at first base. Part of the issue with, like, everyone's talking about Ty France, and Ty France's defensive numbers are basically the same. Can't move particularly to his left, has declined over the last couple of years. So it'd be really nice if they picked up a first baseman and one who'd have a little bit more range there, so they could pick up a few balls. But again, in the ideal world, they'd get somebody else. In the real world, as you say, they probably need, two pitchers, particularly because every indication is that if Lance McCullers returns, it'll still be a while. It'll be in the bullpen. And again, let me say I started that sentence with the word "if," which is, I believe if you look up Lance McCullers' baseball reference page, that's his nickname.
of the opinion that Lance McCullers right now would be classified under September surprise. If we see him this year, it'll be September surprise, because nothing that's come out of the Astros camp has been good news in the last couple of weeks about McCullers. He's been shut down. He's not throwing right now, and they're not saying much else, which isn't great. Even when Luis Garcia didn't take his bullpen, he was still throwing, and I think he's returned to some sort of regimen of throwing. So there's setbacks and then there's setbacks, and I think McCullers is – I don't want to say done, because I hate to put that kind of juju on somebody, but again, it'd be a September surprise. For those people who are dying to replace John Singleton with Ty France or platoon them, statistically, at least offensively, they're kind of the same player this year. Ty France has an OPS plus of 94 so far this year. John Singleton, in 70 fewer at-bats, has a 95. 678 OPS for Singleton, 662 for Ty France. 8 home runs for Ty France in 300 at-bats, 7 home runs for Singleton in 233 at-bats. And his WAR, Singleton, 0.2 compared to 0 for Ty France. There's just not – I know everybody believes in this myth that change of scenery is going to fix a player. There is such a thing as a player that just stops being good at 30 years old. There's a lot of those, actually. And I think Ty France might be one of those. Certainly not worth the juice for the squeeze you'd have to get to make a deal with an in-division rival to get a player that they are, even if they're not interested in, they're going to try to hold you up for something.
Yeah. Let's see. Switching topics here. This was the All-Star week, so we have a little less Astros, results to chew on. When I was a kid, the All-Star game was a big deal, both for the players and for the fans. And it's less of a big deal today. And I can live with that. I was sort of surprised when everyone was outraged that Yordan Alvarez only got one plate appearance in the All-Star game, because my reaction was, Yordan had that hip thing last week. I'm just happy he's not injured. Let's get out of there and move on. How much do you care about the All-Star game? How much do you care about the rest of the stuff around the All-Star stuff? Should we care about it?
The All-Star game, I didn't watch it. It does not interest me anymore. And it's probably stopped being interesting to me whenever interleague play was introduced. Because the mystique of the game, whether it meant anything or not, was the National League and the American League. And really, before free agency really took a hold, you had National League guys that had a lot of pride in being National League guys, and the same for the American League. And they wanted to win. Some of them took it too far. Ray Fossey could absolutely tell you about what taking it too far looks like, Pete Rose. But there was
fair, on the list of things where Pete Rose has taken it too far, that's actually well down the list.
Absolutely. But there was a mystique about it. And some of that was, I was a kid in 1986 and it was cool when all these great players came to the Astrodome and I got to watch that. Now, especially since Bud Selig started screwing with it back in the 90s, tried to make it tied to the regular season by determining home field advantage of the World Series, which was weird. You started adding this home run derby, which was fun at first, and now it's got kind of played out. Maybe I'm just burnt out on it, but it seemed to be a lot more fun when it was 10 pitches and whatever happened, and then you just move forward from there. You have guys bowing out of it now, like you have guys bowing out of the slam dunk contest in the NBA. I don't know what the answer is. I know it's not something that is appointment television for me anymore. If it happens to be on, I'll look at it. But the reality is, I'm glad Altuve sat out. I'm glad that Yordan didn't get hurt. Very clearly, he asked to have one at bat and then be taken out of the game because he is dealing with a few nagging things, as you do. And I'm also of the age where I remember the Astros used to famously only get one player on the roster. So that didn't bother me to see one at bat and be done. That's what I was used to growing up.
Yeah.
It was rare that you got 2 or 3. I saw a clip recently of Jose Cruz standing next to Nolan Ryan, and it's like, yep, that's pretty much what we used to get. We had 2 good players, and then they would stand next to Dave Parker on the bench and maybe come in later. So yeah, I don't know how you fix it. I don't know that you can fix it. I like the idea of the futures. I like the idea of the futures game being more prevalent. I think Jim said it last week about making it a situation where that is the only game on Sunday night before the All-Star game. I would like more of a skills competition rather than just the home run derby like the NFL has done with their the Pro Bowl is the worst of all the All-Star games, by the way. But the skills competition is actually kind of compelling because there are guys out there having fun just trying to outdo one another on, one-on-one stats. It's not team dependent or any of that kind of stuff. And you could have guys that aren't necessarily Pro Bowlers doing the quarterback competition or doing the wide receiver competition or whatever those things are.
You could have John Singleton for the bat flip a single competition.
100%, but I don't have a problem with them doing fun things. What they're doing now isn't fun. Even the players in the home run derby this year, most of the players left the sidelines before the finals started. They just went home because it drug on. It felt like, but it's a marketing event, and Major League Baseball, as we've mentioned, isn't great at marketing, so it's kind of on brand, I guess.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that the real solution would be a DeLorean. Because part of what made you mentioned part of it, right? You had rules that prevented people who signed with the National League team. It made it really hard for them ever ending up on an American League team back in like the 50s. And, when I was a kid, there were 2 baseball games on a week. There was 1 baseball game on Saturday on NBC, and then maybe you'd get something on Home Sports, HSC once my parents got that. We didn't have that for years, so I spent a lot of time listening to the Astros on the radio. Shout out to Gene Elston. So the All-Star game was a chance to literally see these players in a way that you hadn't seen them except, you can see them moving as opposed to on my baseball cards. You can see what they actually look like as opposed to what was being described on the radio. I know all that today. I've seen them all play against someone else. And the other thing, too, is part of what hurts all the All-Star games, and this is a broad trend in media, is in 1985, my choices were to watch the All-Star game or some rerun on ABC or CBS.
Yep.
Those were my choices, or, whatever syndicated movie from 1974 I didn't care about on Channel 26.
And frankly, if you've seen the one Matlock episode, you've seen them all, whether it was rerun or first run.
Yeah. Yeah, the young person gets put behind bars where they belong, as the Simpsons taught us.
Whippersnappers.
Yeah. And, today, right, our children will never understand that media environment. We barely understand it because, we quickly moved out of it. Even though you got even a little guy, has gotten to be a teenager as a kid, you had more and more sort of choices. And today, and I assume for the rest of eternity, people will have infinite media choices. And this affects so many other things, but it also affects ratings and interest in the All-Star game because you aren't going to get a lot of casual fans who just happen to flip by it because, they can watch Matlock reruns on, Hulu or whatever channel that's on, and who wouldn't want to do that?
Well, and the All-Star game, I guess, did better than it did in 23. They had 7.4 million viewers this year at some point as ratings go. It was 8 million in 2021. It was 10 million in 2015. It's not a good trend for the game or for the event. And I don't know that baseball has any kind of answer for it as an entity, but I think it is.
That's the trend with everything in media.
Oh, sure.
The Oscars have the same. The Oscars have the same issue for the same reasons.
The only reason the MLB All-Star Game is rated higher than the NBA is because the MLB All-Star Game was actually on a broadcast network versus TNT or TBS or whatever that is.
Also, one of the nice things about baseball is the guys on defense actually try as opposed to just waiting to get the ball back.
You can get hurt pretty easily if you don't try.
Yeah. So at least the thing about like Paul Skeens, like, Paul Skeens was the big story, and for a couple reasons. One is, hey, last year this guy was in college, and it turns out he's the best pitcher. By the way, 4 years ago, Paul Skeens was a guy planning to be in the Air Force right now. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, this is the Paul Skeens' rise is meteoric. And so he was a fun story. He was a bit of attention. His girlfriend's an Instagram star, and she looked good in the pictures.
As an LSU guy, you got to be excited. She's coming back for her 5th year of eligibility for the gymnastics team, right? That's a big point of pride.
She is an Instagram star. She did not actually compete in the. They won the gymnastics championship, and she was a bench warmer.
But she's still coming back. He made a big announcement. My Twitter feed thought I needed to know about it.
It is big on Instagram. The best gymnast in the country is also coming back, and that's obviously a bigger deal.
Probably more important.
Yes, for their chances of repeating. And I actually hung out yesterday with my friend's daughter, who's a 10-year-old gymnastics fan, and she didn't mention Livy, but she mentioned the actual good gymnast. So I was very, Haley Bryan, Louis Finnegan. So it was good to see she had some substance to her. So
probably more likely to mention Paul Skeens at this point than Livy.
Possibly so. But we're going to mention Livy Dunn a lot because I think that'll help her SEO. And we don't have usually we have James's beefcake to do that. So we've got to compensate for it ourselves. But I think that's a worthy way to sort of do that here. A big week for the Astros because they play one of the worst teams in baseball in the A's and then one of the best teams in the Dodgers. So we'll get a measuring stick of can they beat up on a bad team, and then a measuring stick of, like we have with the Orioles series, are they one of the better teams in baseball? Both sort of worth watching, particularly since, hey, they're in the lead for the division and need to keep winning.
Yeah, I think that's what I want to see. Before we start talking about the Dodgers even a little bit, the Astros need to rebound's the wrong word. They won the series against the Mariners, but they need to not take the A's lightly. We have a history with the A's at this time of year to drop a series with them, sometimes get swept by them, and we can go back to 2017 and talk about that happening. The A's are not a good team by any measure. And if we can avoid their closer, which is the only player I think that's valuable to any other player on the roster, they need to win 2 of 3. They need to win all 3 realistically, and not from a standing standpoint, but just from a stop playing down to your competition standpoint. Have been guilty of that at times this year. The Dodgers series is going to be big. It is at home. The Astros, and I know we're going to not want to say this out loud, they've played well at home this year once we got out of April. That's a change from the last couple of years. And then you get the Pirates right after that, and the Pirates are much improved, although it looks like we will not see Mr. Skeens or probably Livy because he will not be making an appearance. He gets the starts on the 23rd against the Cardinals, I believe, and then his next start should be Sunday, so we won't see him. But he'll be in the dugout if you want to try to get a autograph or maybe some enlistment papers, whatever he has to give out.
I mean, that mustache is high quality. So, if you're a mustache fan, if you're a pitching fan, or if you're an Astros fan, worth watching. All right. So that'll do it for us on this week's edition of GoGoAstros. We'll be back again next Monday. Andy, myself, and my kid's going to sleepaway camp. I'll be very relaxed next week. For that, Go Astros.
Go Stros.